Okay, Alexander, we need to talk about the continuing rise of Marine Le Pen in France and the continuing fall of Emmanuel Macron. The elections get closer with each month, and the recent polls have, what is the number? 47% of the French population saying they will vote for Le Pen. It's incredible. I mean, these are, and I imagine these are polls that are very friendly towards Macron's political ideology. So 47 may even be in reality much, much higher. What do you make of this news?
Absolutely. Can I just say, if you want to understand French opinion polls, think about American opinion polls in advance of the elections. I mean, there were opinion polls in advance of the elections last year that were putting Biden 20 points ahead of Trump, sorry. And, you know, we were skeptical, and we were right to be skeptical. You should treat these opinion polls in France with the same skepticism, because they come with identical biases. But can I just say, 47% for Marine Le Pen in the second round. That's when she goes head to head with Macron. According to the opinion polls, she is now leading in the first round. She's ahead of Macron in the first round. If there was a first round in the election today, according to these structurally biased opinion polls, she would come out first. Now, that is unprecedented. That is something that would have been thought unimaginable in France even a few years ago. In the 2017 presidential election, she got 34% of the vote, and she's now in the second round, and she's now polling 47%. That is a huge increase. And as you absolutely rightly say, that almost definitely understates her real level of support in France. If you actually unpack the figures, it's becoming increasingly clear that she has a majority of support amongst French people who are working or retired. She still scores badly amongst the 18 to 24 age group, which is solidly left-wing, as it is pretty much everywhere, and which will vote against her, as you know that kind of group always does. But bear in mind, 18 to 24-year-olds in France, as everywhere else, are far less likely to vote than older voters. And the other community, of course, amongst which she scores less well, are amongst immigrant voters. But amongst working age and retired French people of French ethnicity, she is at the moment looking like a runaway winner. Now, that is an astonishing development. And how is she doing it? She's not doing it from a position of the extreme right, which is how people always characterize her. She is doing it as a Gaullist, a true Gaullist, in the sense that her policies are increasingly mirroring those that were associated with General de Gaulle. So she, for example, wants to take France out of the military arrangements of NATO, which is what de Gaulle did. It will remain part of the overall alliance, but it would not be, the French military would not be integrated into NATO and would not be subordinate to the NATO military structures. She wants to lift the sanctions on Russia, and she says that as French president, that is what she would do. De Gaulle pursued good relations with Russia. She wants to take a very strong position on immigration. De Gaulle took a very strong position on immigration, and she wants to take steps with respect to the economy, which also very closely mirror those that de Gaulle once took. Those are popular policies in France when de Gaulle was alive, and it looks like they're popular policies in France today. And of course, she wants to emphasize French culture, French tradition, French history, all the kind of things which the globalist leadership in Paris scorns. And that, of course, also exactly matches what de Gaulle used to do. And like de Gaulle, She has anti-interventionist, anti-imperialist foreign policy.
Okay, so the big question is, what will the EU do to make sure that Macron wins the election? We've done many videos on this, documenting how the EU goes to extremes in order to make sure that they get the election results they want. I mean, even with Brexit, where after, was it 4 or 5 years, we finally got Brexit after the vote, it showed how the EU will do whatever it takes to make sure that whatever vote takes place, that vote is for the interests of the European Union. Of course, in Brexit, eventually, finally finished. But we saw, we did a video on Barnier and how Barnier now is trying to do whatever he can to prop up Macron. Anyway, the point is that the EU will not even for a second, allow Macron to lose and allow Marine Le Pen to win. So the question is, how far will they go to make sure that Le Pen loses and Macron wins? I mean, what do you see? What tricks, what games, what tactics will the EU take to make sure that the outcome they want is the outcome that that comes about?
They will go all the way, and then they will go further. I mean, they will pull out every stop they have. And the EU and the leadership of the EU and the people who support them in Paris, they have consistently shown that they are terrible at everything, running economies, running every conceivable kind of program that you can think of, running foreign policy. They are good at only one thing, which is retaining control. That's the only thing they are actually skilled at, even if that means manipulating election outcomes. Now, there's two things they can do. Firstly, and I think we have to be prepared for this, there's going to be a big Marine Le Pen scandal between now and the election. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's almost inevitable. We're going to see, anonymous leaks about hacks and Marine Le Pen saying all sorts of things and people in her party involved in all kinds of things, stories about financial speculations and corruption. They're going to play that game for all it's worth. That's baked in the cake, if you like, and we will see how much of an impact that has in France. The other thing, and I have to say this, is that they will do everything they can to control the electoral system in France and to control the information narrative about it. I've got to be very careful what I'm going to say now, but I'm pretty sure that, again, if it looks like those scandals are not working, in fact, they might not only fail to work, I can even see, given the mood in France, that they might actually consolidate support for Le Pen, because the French, who are an extremely sophisticated electorate, not only might see through things like that, they might actually conclude that the elections are being manipulated in such a way that they really want to back Le Pen even more. I mean, that's entirely possible. If they see that, then, as I said, I think that even more direct steps to control the election outcome are not only not to be excluded, they are all but guaranteed. That is the problem Le Pen faces. She doesn't just have to win. In order to win, she must win big. Now, the trajectory is heading in her direction. Things are moving her way. And if there is a surge in inflation in France, as there is everywhere else, they might move even further her way. I think it's quite possible. But no one should underestimate the challenges.
Yeah, hearing you speak, I just think to myself, we saw the same thing in the U.S., the same exact thing, and look at what happened. This is why, I mean, it's, I don't know what they're going to do, but I agree with you that they're going to do everything in their power, Absolutely. To make sure Macron comes out on top. And we shouldn't be, when the election is held and on that day when we get the results, if they are for Macron, people that should come back to this video, and we shouldn't be surprised because the EU, the globalists, they'll do absolutely everything to make sure that it is Macron that wins.
They will pull out every stop, and as I said, this is the one thing they do well. I mean, they're terrible at everything else. In fact, they're hopelessly bad at everything else, but they're extremely good at this. They're extremely good at keeping their own people in charge and at marginalizing and pushing challengers out of base. But they failed in Britain, so they're not completely invincible. And I would say that if there is any one country left in the European Union where such a challenge might be effective, because the French population, French people, I mean, they're a pretty tough bunch, actually. I mean, I don't want to sort of sentimentalize things, but France has a very, very long history. They're the sort of people, it's a sophisticated and tough-minded electorate also. Bit like the British, they're in a very different way. It's just possible that might fail there too. It's very difficult, though, to win through against this, and no one should underestimate the challenge.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's there's no doubt that the British showed the world the way, showed Europe the way to get out.
Yeah.
But God, it took forever. I mean,
Absolutely.
It really took forever to finally get the UK out of Europe. And
Yeah.
it was a different type of vote as well. I mean, one was a referendum.
It was.
And the election is kind of the French election. I'm sure they'll be able to get all their media cronies and big tech involved so they could, immediately smear people that don't agree and just, put everything under the rug and just say, that's it. The result's done. We're wrapping it up. Anyone that disagrees,
Absolutely.
deplatformed, censored, going to prison, whatever it is. And that's that.
Absolutely.
The referendum
Absolutely.
had a different dynamic to it. But boy, did
Absolutely.
the British really did. I mean, they stood tough. They said, no, this is what we voted. We are not going to back down. This is the result.
Yes.
And that's that. And even
Yes.
people that voted against Brexit, to their credit, a lot of people who even voted
Absolutely.
against Brexit also said, look, I accept the vote and we're not going to change it. So I don't know. What do you think of what I said, comparing the two?
No, you're absolutely right. Now, as I said, they're very different societies. They're very different cultures. The French, and whom I know well, I mean, I've spent time in France, the French and the British have different outlooks. But against that, they're both heirs, if you like, to a very powerful political tradition and a very powerful culture in their own countries and their own societies. And as I said, the French, it's an exceptionally sophisticated electorate. It can certainly see through things that happen. It's also, by the way, and this perhaps more so than the British, an electorate that is prepared to, come out, protest in a way that perhaps the British more stolidly don't do. The British stolidly take their position and stick to it, and they're stubborn, but they don't go out and make massive protests in, Parliament Square. In France, they can. That is an important difference. So, the French are not to be underestimated, but again, it's going to be a tremendous battle. And whether this can survive the pressures that it's going to come under between now and the election is another thing again. What I will say is this is going to be a watershed election, because if Le Pen wins and France changes, in a more structured, democratic, legal way, then you can start to see things happening in France in an orderly way. If, on the other hand, all these stops are pulled and the ancien regime, if I can call it that, the current system, reproduces and preserves itself, then I think that the prospects of a massive crash and a systems collapse in France grow much greater. And bear in mind, that is consistent with French history. France, you see these attempts to sort of control the situation. They're very successful up to the point when they fail utterly and everything falls apart. And that can happen very suddenly. And that is the tradition in France. It's a tradition the French are not only very well informed about, but they take a certain pride in, which is paradoxical. It's different from Britain. Anyway, we will see. This is going to be a watershed election.
All right. We'll be covering it, guys. Go to the Duran shop. You'll link down below. 10% off when you use the code REALNEWS at checkout. And look for us on BitChute. Look for us on Odyssey. Look for us on Super U. And look for us on Locals. Join our Locals community and be part of a really vibrant conversation that is taking place there. All the links are down below in the description box. Take care.